Hello guys, how's it going? My name is Dalaran. It is only 2 weeks until Shadowlands is finally released, and it looks like Blizzard is kind of scrambling to make as many updates as possible. We are either getting updates on the pre-patch, those are getting thrown over on the beta, or vice versa. We're getting updates thrown on the beta and then added to the build for the pre-patch, since the pre-patch and the beta updates are two separate patches. And it looks like that's exactly what Blizzard did with this update on the beta. Half of these updates are similar to the pre-patch updates and in various ways that they're going to affect these classes. But then there's a couple of updates on the beta that are only limited to the beta. So these are some of the new updates that Blizzard continues to iterate on classes as we're going forward into the Shadowlands. When it comes to Demon Hunters, it doesn't look like there's too many changes. However, the Carrion ability, Elysian Decree, which has been quite popular with Demon Hunters over on the beta, is getting a slight nerf. Well, I say slight, but this is actually quite huge. It looks like Blizzard wants to standardize a lot of abilities to be more for priority of single target. Elysian Decree, fairly easy ability to play with, only 1 minute cooldown, will have diminished effects on enemies beyond 5 targets. We've seen quite a lot of abilities and effects adjusted in such manner for Shadowlands, with Blizzard really trying to make sure characters are capped and how many targets they can affect with abilities, and even scaling the effectiveness of those. Elysian Decree was a very powerful ability for Demon Hunters, so I think it's going to be up in the air for a lot of DHs going forward, which Covenant do really want to play with. When it comes to Druids, we have an adjustment to the Feral. It looks like they are getting a buff, very similar to what we're getting on live, except this one is a 9% buff. On pre-patch, it says all abilities have an increase of damage by 8%. This one is an aura for 9%, doesn't account for auto attacks, which is quite a huge portion of your damage. So it's not fair to say that this is a 9% overall buff. It is as close to an 8% buff as I guess it could be compared to the pre-patch. Then we're also getting a Restoration Druid damage nerf. So Restoration Druids, don't fret, your healing will not be changed. However, the aura that modifies the amount of damage you do, whether in cat form, bear form, boomkin form, or doing any types of damage, is getting a bit of a nerf going forward. This is probably to hit up on the Restoration Druids and their effectiveness, I'd say primarily Mythic Pluses, and the amount of damage they do. Blizzard is trying to kind of hold them back a little bit. We also have some changes to a couple legendaries. Memory of the Mother Tree is getting a slight nerf, while Verdant Infusion is getting a slight buff. For Hunters, we saw the same buffs and nerfs that happened over on the pre-patch. Blizzard doesn't really want to touch Cobra Shot or Barb Shot, but they are reducing the effectiveness of all the Beastmaster Hunter abilities by 5%. Kill Command, the Bestial Wrath getting a slight tune-up, but only the smallest tune-ups ever possible. As well as Marksman's Volley change in pre-patch has also made it to the beta, but that's going to be about it for Hunters. A little bit weird that Beastmastery just got a flat nerf. Also Frost Mages, the pre-patch changes that have happened to them with the nerf to Icelands, the nerf to Splitting Ice, the slight buffs to Freeze and Rain and Comet Storm are also in the beta. However, the legendary Freeze and Winds, which has been a very popular one with Frost Mages that has been nerfed and nerfed and nerfed again, has gotten nerfed even more, where Frozen Orb will give you Fingers of Frost every 3 seconds instead of every 2, which might not even be as much of a nerf. It might be a change in terms of the timing and the amount of lances that you can get out of it, so it's a slight change with the legendary either way, but potentially a nerf going forward. Windwalkers, same thing. You got a flat buff to a lot of your abilities, very similar to that of a pre-patch. Very much hoping that this might be enough to maybe make Windwalkers a little bit better, because without adding immunities, I think it's going to be down to whether Windwalkers do enough damage. So I'm hoping the Blizzard adds them a little bit better damage, or at least if anything better scaling that they had back in BFA. Also, on a side note, Mist River, Yulon's Whisper Legendary got a kind of a hefty-ish nerf. I guess it was maybe popular or maybe too effective, so Blizzard ended up taking that one pretty quick. For Holy Paladins, Holy Shock is getting a slight buff in terms of effectiveness, while Glimmer of Light is getting a nerf, very similar to that of a pre-patch. Legendary effect of Shock Barrier can now protect up to 5 targets, so that's actually a pretty big buff going forward overall. Just like pre-patch, Retribution Paladins should be doing a little bit more damage with a variety of different abilities. However, a couple talents also, just like pre-patch, have been nerfed. Execution Sentence, just a pre-patch, took a bit of a nerf. Also can no longer ever crit, so that's a pretty major. Sanctified Rods got a nice buff, and Virtuous Command Conduit, which is my favorite for Retribution Paladin, took a pretty hefty chunk of nerf, so very sad to see that. I was actually very much hoping for that conduit would stay strong, because that allowed Retribution Paladin less of a bursty, more of a sustained playstyle. But it looks like Blizzard saw that it was too strong, because I guess it was, so they're going to be nerfing it going forward. And then Blizzard also took a pretty decent nerf to Vanquisher's Hammer, kind of hammered the hammer if you want to say that way. Retribution, Holy, and Protection all are going to see slightly less shadow damage out of this ability. I haven't really seen a lot of Paladins go with the Necrolord Covenant. Of course, there are some here and there trying out the ability, and maybe that's just one of those abilities that was hiddenly good all of a sudden for Palas, so it looks like Blizzard is going to be taking a nerf bat to this one. Just like pre-patch, Blizzard is going to be beating up Discipline Priest a little bit with your Shadow Ward Pain, as well as Purge the Wicked getting slight nerf in terms of the damage and the effectiveness. But we did see some changes to Shadow Priest. Apparently Dispersion will only increase your movement speed by 50% instead of 75%. Also, Shadow Crash is getting yet another nerf and down back to the sanity that it was costing. All of a sudden, Blizzard went to the old design of the ability, tried to make it a lot stronger, and I guess maybe it was so good, maybe in AoE situations, maybe even in single target, that they had to go back and nerf it. So it's kind of interesting how we started with the Shadow Crash we have currently, then we changed to a 3-stack thing, then we went to like a back but a stronger version of Shadow Crash, and I think we're basically back where we were with Shadow Crash. It might still be a little bit stronger than the original version, but it's essentially the same ability. It's interesting how we kind of had to go all the way around in order to figure that one out. Finally, with Warrior, Arms Warrior, just like pre-patch, is getting a lot of your abilities increased in damage by 6%. Also, Fury Warriors, 10% damage increase, very similar to that of pre-patch, and hopefully this will be enough to make Warriors a little bit stronger, because from the Warriors that I've talked to on the beta, they're not really feeling all too confident about being able to perform in terms of the damage numbers against other classes, melee and ranged, in a raid environment, dungeon environment, except for the utility they bring, which is apparently amazing. Also, all the other Fury Warrior minor adjustments with Talent of Frenzy and the ability of Whirlwind are also available on the beta as of pre-patch, but Dragon's Roar seems to have taken a bit of a nerf. So Dragon Roar will hit all enemies within 12 yards, damage reduced to enemies that are secondary targets, which is going to make that AoE beautiful burst that Dragon's Roar can do, especially if you gain the crit, make it a little bit less effective. This could maybe make it a little bit worse for Protection Warriors to build up that damage and pick up the aggro. For Arms and Fury, that is also a little bit of a damage decrease. We are only 2 weeks away from the expansion release, and usually towards the end of the beta cycle, on the very last day, Blizzard does some massive patch on all the different scaling of abilities, any major changes that need to be done. So I'm actually very interested to see if we'll have it, since this cycle of release for this expansion, I'd say is a lot different than every other expansion so far. Every other expansion had a lot of time and didn't have nearly as weird circumstances as we had with this one. But Shadowlands so far is looking good. Variety of classes still getting tuned, which is a good thing, and it's probably going to be continuous tuning as we head into the actual release, after people get into the PvP, after people get to test out legendaries in a more widespread fashion, and after really finally get to tackle the first raid of a brand new expansion. So there's probably going to be more changes to come, but this is everything we have in the beta so far. Thank you guys so much for watching this video, hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see all of you in the next one.